Tristan, the Rams and the Lions put on a show for a Sunday night. It did not disappoint. To me, this NFC juggernaut, it was obviously the best game of the week to me in week one. I think overtime kind of makes that true. But also, these two teams on the field, they just looked like the most well-rounded teams. Yeah, there was some sloppiness. Obviously, like you had mentioned in the opener, not playing preseason, these guys do get tired. You do see that, especially on the defensive side of the ball, happen pretty quick. I mean, early in the third quarter, the Rams defense was just kind of gassed out. The Rams did make a pivot at halftime, it seemed, and they put on a fight to come back into this game. Ultimately, I think that the Lions are just a better football team as it stands right now. Losing Puka during the game did hurt a lot. Tell me what you think. What is your initial reaction to this game? Do you also think that these two teams are the best in the NFC right now?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely at the top, right? The really all that this Lions-Ram games does is solidify that these are two of the Super Bowl contenders, right? These are two Super Bowl threats. Both of these teams could win a championship, and they went to war tonight. I'll say this. You say you feel like the Lions are the best team. They won the game, but I really came around. I came away impressed with the Rams, and not just because I'm high on them, not just because I've been kind of riding the Rams since last season, but the Rams were dealing with a complete makeshift offensive line. I mean, they basically had 5 starters in different positions that weren't typical. The fact that they were able to stay in this game, run the ball semi-effectively, I mean, not to their, ideal, but they had 83 total rushing yards. It was still a factor in the offense. Stafford threw 49 times, more than you would like, but I was surprised that they were able to stay competitive and really almost win the game with that offensive line, all those injuries, Puka going out. The Rams had a tough injury luck of it, and they were still able to hang in there with the Lions up until the end, and the Lions just delivered the drive they needed at the end of the football game.
When the Lions were running the ball, they looked unstoppable. David Montgomery just gashed everywhere in the field.
Dude, that overtime drive, David Montgomery just put the team on his shoulders and said, I'll do it.
Yeah, he said, hey, load up here. I got you. Let's move. And they couldn't stop him. Jahmyr Gibbs was the same way. They mostly utilized him in the passing game, which it works, those little swing routes out and everything.
But when he went between the tackles tonight, he was effective, surprisingly so.
He didn't do bad. This offensive line is really, really good. It has a great blocking tight ends with Laporta and the other guy, 80-something, don't know his name. But, Laporta's there, and that's all that matters. He was underutilized. I know this because he's on my fantasy roster. And didn't do great. But, when the running game was happening, you didn't need to rely on Jared Goff. Like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And that's what the Lions did really well tonight. They stuck to the run. I was really proud of that. I think that Dan Campbell didn't freak out. One thing I do want to ask you, what do you think of the timeout situation at the end? Sean McVay not using the timeouts, especially after that 10-second runoff.
I'm actually completely fine with it because I feel like at that point, it has been so difficult for the Rams to move the football. It's not like the Rams were going out there and driving it every single play. Like the drives they had were very, very difficult. And most of the Rams' points actually came off of Lions penalties. They had, I think, their first 10 points came off of Detroit penalties. It was one that was a roughing the passer and one that was a pass interference. So the Rams had to get some help to even get on the board. If their offense had been fully efficient, fully healthy, yeah, you want to use your timeouts there. But the way the defense has been playing, I was okay with Sean McVay saying, nah, we're going to let it run. We're going to, try to win this game on defense. Because now in this whole offensive-minded culture, it's like, oh, well, why didn't he just want to, use his timeout? I'm not saying you're saying this. I'm just saying you get this a lot. It's like, and get the ball back. Well, defense is half of the game of football. He trusts his defense to make a stop. And ultimately, by the way, they did. They forced the field goal, which forced overtime. I was more critical on that drive of the way Dan Campbell or maybe Ben Johnson seemed a little lackadaisical with their offensive play calling. It almost was like they were trying to kill time because they didn't want to.
They were playing for overtime.
Yeah. They were playing for overtime. That's exactly right. That bothered me. And I thought they were kind of going to lose the game. The drive that they had in overtime was the drive and the ferocity I thought they would have at the end of the fourth.
Yep. Yeah, they went away from the run in that 2-minute offense,
Yes.
And I disagree with that.
And they had all their timeouts.
Yes, they did. I disagreed with that, but ultimately the Lions won. I'm happy that I picked the Lions as the Super Bowl team because out of all the teams that played, I know there were 14 other games. This was my favorite by far. And then also it was the most, competitive. I do think the Rams have a few things to work on, especially we don't know what the status of Puka is. We'll probably know first thing tomorrow morning. And hopefully there's no big injury. Hopefully he can come back in a couple of weeks. But when the Rams are on the field, it was more laborious when they were on the field. It was something like they just didn't have those really flashy plays as much as the Lions did, or at least those big gash plays.
They had a couple, but it took a long time to get them and for them to pop.
Mainly at the end of the last 5 minutes when Stafford threw that, how he hit that guy.
You talking about when he was falling backwards and hit the crossing route?
How?
Incredible play.
Stafford people forget, vintage Stafford, the no-look passer, he was the OG to do that.
He's so good.
He is very, very good for his age. Put nothing past the Rams. They are in this fight for the long haul, I believe.
I agree.
But what we saw tonight was just the display of the two best NFC teams in the market.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really the takeaway from this game. Both of these teams are going to be contenders. They're going to be playoff threats. The only concern with the Rams is injuries and just making sure you can get guys healthy, particularly the offensive line and Puka, and stay healthy because that offensive line is not going to survive the whole season. To Detroit, last point, they wanted to address the secondary this offseason. Man, they did it. The secondary played great. I was really impressed with both defenses. Detroit trying to address the secondary and Los Angeles trying to deal with the retirement of Aaron Donald. I felt like the Rams defense, you look at the score and you're like, 26-20. The Rams defense played excellent for most of the football game. They gave their offense a chance. It was just a struggle for them to put up points. So even though obviously one team had to lose, we knew before this game both teams were going to be fine. I came away feeling the same way I did going into this game that, these are two teams that could win the Super Bowl. It was a great game, probably my favorite of the weekend as well.
What a Sunday night.